Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe Muro. And now, here's Zoe.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the New Thought Media Network. My name is Zoe Muro, and I am delighted and honored to be your host for Choice, Your Creative Superpower, coming to you from Oakland, California, each Thursday at 12 noon Mountain Time, 11 a.m. Pacific. We are here to explore how you can wield your superpower for the greatest good and co-create a life experience that is most fulfilling. For those of you coming back, it's so good to see you here again. And for those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. I am so glad that you've tuned in. Hello, Shay. Good to see you. Okay. So, I am a religious science practitioner with the New Thought Media Network. I'm also a transformational coach. My ministry as a practitioner and my mission as a coach are to help people live their lives to the fullest. Today, episode 60, we'll be exploring the relationship between choice and obligation. Now, choice and obligation are certainly related, but they are definitely different concepts. Choice refers to selecting an option among several alternatives, while obligation, on the other hand, speaks to a sense of duty or responsibility to do something. Now, obligation can have a profound effect on the choices that we make. And at times, obligation can be seen as a guide in determining our choices. At other times, it can be seen as a limiting or a restricting factor. So, where do obligations come from? Well, for most adults, obligations can come from the work that we do, our family, other relationships, communities, organizations we belong to. They can come from our sense of morality, our ethics, even our identity, and of course, the legal system, to name just a few. I want to say that the easiest obligations to understand in terms of choice would be laws. But there are definitely times that I can see a legal obligation as being clear and obvious, like the legal speed limit or one-way streets. But at other times, what we are legally obligated to do can cause tremendous difficulties and unease. I mean, depending on where you live, capital punishment, whether you're for or against, gun control, taxation itself. All of these things are mandated by law, and all of these things obligate us, and all of these things can have, let's say, an uneasy effect on our choices. If you are a proponent of the way a law is currently written and enforced, it's likely choosing to comply is no real issue. It's a law. However, if you're opposed, then choice definitely becomes more nebulous. But we'll revisit that point later. Obligations often influence our choices by enforcing a priority, sort of pushing things to the top. As much as one might prefer to spend their money any way they see fit, there are the obligations of paying taxes, paying bills, paying for your auto insurance, all of which, well, all of which decrease one's spendable income. Have you ever been invited to an event that falls at the exact same time as a previous commitment? Well, now, this is a perfect example of how a number of factors are involved in whether we see this as an obligation or a choice. The distinction can certainly be, less than clear at times. Clarity, or lack thereof, might very well stem from our relationships or our roles. For example, you're invited to a fantastic party, but a friend is counting on you to get them to the airport in time for their flight. Obligations stemming from your relationship. I think that would take precedence over choice. Let's take the same invitation, but this time you're scheduled to teach a class for your organization. Your role as an instructor is a priority, and the obligation precludes choice. Obligations based on a contractual agreement, and there are many of these, although we don't typically think of them as such, can significantly limit our choices. For example, while a student might prefer to choose what time they'd get up and when they choose to go to school, there are classes that are scheduled, and there is therefore a schedule that needs to be upheld. Failure to attend the classes has significant repercussions. So obligations often shape our behavior, and they result in changes in how we decide what to choose. For example, as a parent, one would likely feel the need to set a good example, to be a role model for one's children. At least one would hope so. It's difficult to encourage children to be open about sharing their feelings if their parent is continually hiding their own feelings or presenting a very unbalanced view of their life. Oh, everything's fine, everything's great, everything's wonderful. Yeah. Kids know that that's not true. To put it simply, encouraging your children to tell you what's wrong, what's troubling them, while never letting them see your sorrow, never letting them see your concern, that does not engender trust. That does not build a way for children to understand. Similarly, as a parent, having the obligation to provide for them, to protect them, one would likely be significantly more risk adverse if your action or inaction could be potentially harmful. Let's take that a step farther. Early on in a child's life, it's not uncommon for a parent to choose to, let's say, begin a college fund, or to ensure that an athletically or musically oriented child has coaching or instruction to enable them to follow their interests. And notice I said athletically or musically oriented, not talented. All right? Because if your child is interested in music, interested in athletics, regardless of their current ability, why not encourage them? Of course, there is always the possibility, if not the likelihood, that there can be conflicting obligations. I mean, we have a wonderful phrase called work-life balance that speaks directly to that dilemma. There's a big project at work. Absolutely has to be completed. As your work requires, you have an obligation to ensure its completion. Meanwhile, remember that friend who needs to get to the airport? Well, hopefully these obligations can both be handled, but clearly things can get complicated as obligations collide. In fact, while some obligations become a mainstay in one's life, sometimes obligations change. They become obsolete, or they become unnecessary, or they gain importance, depending on any one of a number of factors. A person's age, getting married, changing jobs, retiring, on and on. And then there's the emotional side of obligations. We might make choices to avoid being criticized or to avoid anxiety if we don't follow a given obligation. Or on a more positive note, recognizing how important something is to someone else. And then we allow that to inform our choices, right? So we accept a greater sense of obligation because of that relationship. And as much as obligations affect our choices, there's a significant number of ways that our choices actually, excuse me, a number of significant ways that our choices actually affect our obligations. So let's take a look at that one too. The most straightforward way that we choose to accept an obligation is some sort of a contractual agreement. All right, for example, signing a lease, getting a loan, joining any number of organizations that have very specific rules or practices you agree to uphold. Typically, anytime that you're getting licensed for something or certified for something, there are obligations that go with that in terms of what you must do to acquire the certification or the licensing, what you must do to maintain it, and the types of actions or activities that would either be appropriate or inappropriate. All of those are obligations based on this, in essence, contractual agreement. Close second to that, in terms of being straightforward, would be choosing to make a promise or a vow or an oath. Now, these aren't necessarily legally binding, but they do tie into one's integrity, into one's authenticity, and therefore one's values and beliefs. For some people, their obligations are associated with their very sense of identity. So if you are, for example, a doctor, there are obligations that you take on as a doctor, and it goes beyond simply your profession. I mean, if you truly believe in your Hippocratic oath, it makes a big difference in how you view your obligations. All right. Another example. Let's say someone identifies with a specific religion. Well, if they belong to a particular religion, if that is what they follow, then they would have to accept the obligations of that religion in terms of their behavior in the world. Likewise, anyone following a specific spiritual path is likely to feel that Their values and beliefs engender a certain way of being in the world and how they want to interact with others. For myself, for example, as an adherent of New Thought, I believe that God is indeed all there is, that we are all created by the One. Therefore, everything that I can say about who and whose I am as a creation of God, I am obligated to say is true for all creations of God. Okay. Now, in point of fact, our beliefs, our values can bring about choices to even enter a certain profession or to volunteer for certain causes, which in turn then brings about more obligations. For myself, I've always felt that learning is growing, and growth is a mainstay, foundation of a fulfilling life. Now, this perspective has definitely brought me through a whole series of different jobs and professions in my life, culminating in my current ministry as a spiritual practitioner and an advisor, and my mission as a transformational coach. Now, just as my licensing as a practitioner brings about certain obligations, so too does my sense of unity and community with all of life. Now, I don't see myself, nor do I promote myself as someone to be followed or as some great spiritual leader. No, I focus on supporting and enabling people to learn more about their own sacred truth, to grow in their awareness of their spirituality, and to live their lives as fully as possible. There was a time in my life, actually a number of times, when I deliberated over ending my life. When I was at my absolute lowest point and seriously doubting that there was any reason for me to continue, I was pulled back from that abyss. First by pure dumb luck, or maybe it was divine intervention. I don't know. But my attempts, thankfully, failed. But then, by recognizing my obligations as a father, as a brother, as a friend, I could not leave my children, leave my siblings, leave my loved ones in that way. A choice I would never want for them. You know, there's something I need to be very clear about here. As blessed as I was to have had that realization, my decision not to end my life because of those obligations would likely not have sustained me. It wasn't until I chose to live my life as opposed to not ending it, right? That's a pretty significant difference, right? It wasn't until I chose to live it that I saw the greatest changes. And I found sustaining energy and hope. I am truly grateful for that choice. I think back to when I was 30 years old and I was told, actually, I was 29 years old and I was told by a doctor I would not live to be 30 because of all of the damage that alcohol and drugs had done to my body. And here I am, 73, over 42 years sober. Folks, make no mistake about it. None of us is truly alone. Each of us is connected. Each of us has a place in this world, a purpose, a unique and an exquisite gift that no one else can provide, no matter the circumstances, no matter the conditions that might cast doubt or disbelief. Thank you, Shay. One of the things that I've learned in my life is that there are often far better reasons for doing things than seeing them as obligations. Being able to replace, quote unquote, this is what I have to do with, quote unquote, this is something I get to do can bring about a wonderful energetic lift. Do I enjoy that I have to corner our aging diabetic cat to administer her medicines? Oh, hell no. But I am grateful that I get to increase her quality of life and I get to increase her time with us in comfort and in greater health. We've seen again and again how perspective, how mindset has a profound effect on one's life experience. And this exploration of choice and obligation is no exception. The word obligation is actually derived from a Latin word, obligare, which means to bind. But it also can mean to bind to or to connect. So changing one's perspective of obligations by choosing to see an obligation as an opportunity to uphold one's promise, an opportunity to provide support or to nurture, an opportunity to serve the greater good. Oh, that can bring about a very different feeling and a very different energy. Then there's the other side of choice and obligations. That is not recognizing that one actually has a choice and instead believing that an obligation takes precedence. This is where personal boundaries might come into play. I remember when I lived in New York City many years ago, weddings and funerals were steeped in both traditions and obligations. Tradition often dictated certain patterns of behavior, and my Italian and Sicilian family, although we were also mostly Greek, we didn't know that. We didn't have DNA testing. But anyway, my family often saw tradition as obligation. Who could be invited to a wedding? Who would or would not be allowed to attend a funeral? Oh man, it got complicated. I mean, it went way beyond where you sat or who you spoke to. It was trying to understand, all right, so this cousin doesn't like that cousin, and that cousin doesn't like this uncle, and therefore we have never allowed that side of the family to come to our gatherings. It's like, oh, seriously. On many occasions, we couldn't even remember why something was required and another thing wasn't permitted. Each successive generation that was born here in the United States chose to either accept the tradition as obligation or, well, we sought to reevaluate and even create new traditions. I mean, traditions have to start someplace. Now, no matter how an obligation comes into being, whether it's through tradition or culture or agreement, one's obligation to follow it is indeed a choice. And as is true for all choices, doing what we can to ensure that they align with our values, oh, that goes a long way towards a far more satisfying and fulfilling life experience. So let me bring something up here. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, so I want to end today's exploration with a few quotes that present a variety of perspectives on our topic of obligation and choices. So let's take a look at these. Okay, this first one is from Pliny the Elder, a Roman statesman and scholar. He said, "Let honor be to us as strong an obligation as necessity is to others." This is from Richard Bach, an author. He said, "Your only obligation in any lifetime is to be true to yourself." Now, I'm not going to say which of these I believe takes precedence over another or anything like that. I simply wanted to provide a series of different perspectives. This is from Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States and a statesman. By the way, when he uses the word bound, what he's referring to is obligated, right? I'm not bound to win, but I am bound to be true. I'm not bound to succeed, but I am bound to live up to what light I have. I am not bound to succeed, but I am bound to live up to what light I have. Okay, that one really thrills me. I had to throw that in. All right. This next one is from Paulo Coelho, novelist and a lyricist. Paulo says, "Meet your obligations." But obligations never prevented anyone from following their dreams. Remember, you are a manifestation of the absolute. And do only those things in your life that are worth the effort. Only those who do that will understand the great transformations that are yet to be seen. That's really powerful. And lastly, I'm going to give the final word on this to Thomas Merton, a monk and an author. Finally, I am coming to the conclusion that my highest ambition is to be what I already am. That I will never fulfill my obligation to surpass myself unless I first accept myself. And if I accept myself fully in the right way, I will already have surpassed myself. If there is any time that I have ever seen a quote that basically said that I need to be in alignment with who and whose I am, that's it. All right. So let me do this. Get that out of there. All right. So that'll do it for today. If you'd like to explore choice and obligations further, if you would like to, let me see. If you'd like to connect with me for a practitioner session or a coaching session or just discussion or some prayer, you can email me at zodimuro@gmail.com. I would be delighted to hear from you. And of course, anything that you share with me is always in complete confidence. That is an obligation of my profession. That is an obligation of my authenticity and integrity. Folks, it's been wonderful spending time with you this week. But give yourself a gift. Give those around you a gift. And explore the New Thought Media Network. Go to ntmedia.org, and you can see all that we have to offer. And I strongly recommend that you share ntmedia.org with all of your friends, all of your loved ones. Put it out on your Facebook feed. Put it out into your Instagram. So when you do go to ntmedia.org, some of the things that you'll see are going on today. 1 p.m. Mountain Time. There's Finding the Joy in the Journey with the delightful Reverend Gina Colvario Krupka. Her special guest today is Reverend Christina Jones. 2 p.m. Mountain Time. Practitioner Ken Ludwig presents the Vibrant Living Hour. At 4 p.m. Mountain Time, Reverend Rock Ford presents his spiritual toolkit. And I want you to know that it is our mission here at the New Thought Media Network to bring the joy of new thought, the benefits of new thought, the beauty of new thought to the widest audience possible. To do so, though, we need your support. So if possible, please go to ntmedia.org/donate. Help us make this a world that works for everyone. You're very welcome. Thank you, Shay. And right back at you. All right, so let me see. I want to take this away, and I want to go here, and let me see. What do we have left? What we have left is to say goodbye. I look forward to seeing you again next week, folks. Until we meet again, choose wisely, choose well. Much love and many, many, many blessings. Namaste.
Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zo DeMuro.